Hello, hello. Hi, everyone. Hello. How are you guys? How are you all? Today we have a special guest, Chrisvtv. Just a couple of minutes. Hello, hello. How are you guys? How are you? Yay, man. A couple of minutes. We are waiting some people that joined the live, and this is the reel of Chrisvtv, a big friend of this page. We are so happy to host him today. Really happy. Highspeed commercial filmmaker, specialized in slow motion stuff, tabletop, robotic motion control, and everything you are watching now. We shared a lot of stuff of him, and today you have the opportunity to ask him anything. And we are ready to invite Chris. Okay. We are ready. Feel free, guys, to ask anything. Hello, man.
Hey,
How are you?
I'm really good. How you guys doing?
Okay. Can you hear me good?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Okay.
Yeah.
We are showing your show reel. We are so happy, really happy to have you today with us. Guys, feel free to ask anything. You can use the question mark below, the button below, so I can pick the most relevant question. And you can also drop the question in the comments. So, man, let's start in how you started. People asked, a lot of people asked how you started and how you started your journey in the film industry.
Yeah. So when I very first started, I started in television. I started at a news television station. Randomly, I had some friends that were working at the station, and I didn't even know we had a TV station in the town I was living at. And they invited me down to come help out with a live music broadcast show and just run B camera. And the person who was supposed to do it, they didn't show up for whatever reason. And I had a camera before. I had used a camera. So they said, hey, come down if you want and check it out. And so I did. So I just showed up to the station and did B camera for this live music sort of band show. And the owner of the station happened to be there. And he said I did a good job. And he asked me if I was interested in making a career in TV. And I said, I didn't know you could get paid to just play with cameras and hang out with people. And he said, oh yeah, it's a big thing. So I said, yeah, when can I start? And he said, as soon as you want. So I started the next morning. I quit my job. I was working at a grocery store, and I just started doing media. So that lasted for probably 3 years or so. And then I learned that there was a thing called freelance filmmaking, because I wasn't super into TV. I didn't really like news, and I wasn't a big fan of that style of media working that way. And so I found out about freelance because all these people would come to the TV station and they would need commercials made, and the TV station didn't have time to do them, so they would sub them out to me, and I would work with those clients on the side. And then I learned that, oh, you can kind of just work for yourself, and you can hop around with different companies and agencies. So that kind of started the whole really long journey of being a freelance filmmaker and working in commercials. And that led to meeting new companies, which led to meeting new agencies and different brands to work with, and more people, made more and more connections until I started getting on larger sets with bigger crews and bigger gear. And then I ran into phantom cameras about probably 8 years ago or so. And I was like, now this is the coolest thing I've ever seen. Like, the very first shoot I ever did was a fire breathing shoot. So I showed up on set and they were like, oh, we got phantom cameras. And I was like, oh, that sounds awesome. Like, I've never seen one. And so we did a high speed shoot with a crazy fire breathing guy. And it was the craziest thing I'd ever seen. It was amazing just to watch the fire in real time and then see it back at 1,000 frames a second. It just blew my mind. So about that time, I decided, well, if I'm going to keep doing this, you know, for another 10, 20, 30 years, I'm going to specialize in stuff that I think is really cool. So that way, no matter what the shoot is, I'm always having fun. So that's kind of the short version of how I got into everything just a lot of years, a lot of years of meeting a lot of people and networking and just never giving up.
You shared already a lot of helpful insight for people, because
Oh,
I receive every day, film school or not, and I'm collecting. I will do a video with all the opinion about how to start, especially
yeah.
film school or not. If you can give your personal opinion about this in a quick way, so we can
Yeah,
dive in.
sure, sure. Um, I think film school is a very personal choice. Some people really, really enjoy it. Some people don't like it. My opinion would be that I don't think it's necessary to go to film school to have a career. I think 100% you don't have to go to film school to get jobs and make money and succeed whatsoever. I think it can be beneficial for some people. There's a lot of, well, part of it depends on where you go to film school. If you go to film school in an area that has a lot of future industry connections, that could be a good thing for you, because sort of the people that you meet in school are like people that you could potentially work with in the future. But one of the downsides of film school, there's a couple downsides in my opinion. One, it costs a lot of money, so you're immediately in a whole bunch of debt when you get out. And then another big one is the technology changes so quickly that if you go to film school for 4 years, by the time your 4 years is over, all the technology is different by then. So it's kind of like you have to learn all over again. Because all of us that are working all the time, we we learn stuff every week, every month. Like it never
Yeah.
stops. Like we're always continuously, what's the next camera? What's the next robot? What's the next this or that? It never ends. So I think that if you want to go to film school, there's nothing wrong with that, but you definitely don't need to go to film school to get work. No one ever in my life has ever asked me if I have a degree. No one's ever asked me anything like that. They just say, hey, send me what your work looks like, and then they decide if they want to work with me. So I think having a really good reel and working with people and making connections is the most valuable thing you can do.
Yeah, absolutely agree. Now I wanna check some question below. So what's your main camera? Let's talking about camera setup, favorite setup, especially for doing what you are doing in slow motion and in the work we are showing now. I change also the video, so guys, you can see
Yeah,
more
I
behind the
wanted to
scenes.
I saw a comment a little bit ago. I wanted to shout out Kiki Slowmo. You should check him out. He does epic stuff, and he said he liked my hat. I appreciate that. Love the Phantom hat. But yeah, so the camera that I most of the time film with for work would be the Flex 4K. I have several Phantom cameras, the HD Gold, the Flexvo 4K, and the Phantom Veo. Me and Daniel, we work together at Via Films. We sort of rent out those cameras to whoever needs them. I guess what I would say about renting versus owning a camera is these days, I try not to buy too much gear, honestly, unless I think it's really going to pay for itself, because especially with, I don't know, there's a camera coming out, every month now almost, like there's a new version of almost anything. It's pretty hard to make your money back year after year after year on the same camera. So I tend to rent cameras. I mean, we do own cameras because we bought them like quite a long time ago. So that's been helpful. But I think these days I tend to rent cameras if I don't have them, way more than invest in buying any new cameras, if that's what the question was. If you have to shoot in
Yeah.
1,000 frames, if you have to shoot in 1,000 frames a second, what is the best camera you would suggest? It kind of depends on what you're doing. I would suggest either the Flex 4K or the Veo 4K, and if you have the budget to rent those, of course, because they're pretty expensive. But the reason I would usually shoot with the Flex 4K over the Veo would be because it's faster, not as far as frame rates are concerned, but it's faster as far as writing your files to the Cinemag inside. It's super fast let me explain how Phantom cameras record for anybody that might not know. When you shoot with a Phantom camera, you put it in a buffer mode, so it's endlessly looping over and over and over. So it's like a DVR kind of, it's just constantly recording over and over and over, and then you hit the trigger, and that saves the predetermined section of what you were trying to capture. Then you choose the in and out points for that part that you just saved, and you write it to the internal CineMag, which is like a giant SSD card. So that process on the Flex 4K, super fast. You could save like a take, I don't know, in 10 seconds. Depends on how much you're going to save. If you want to save the whole thing, it takes longer than that, but you can rip through takes really, really fast. I did an Adidas shoe commercial quite a while ago. I think we did like 120 takes of really tiny shots. Like we probably only saved about 15 seconds per shot, but we just like ripped through them super fast. So the problem with the Veo, it's a great camera, but if you want to save that footage, it's really, really slow comparatively. It's, I don't know what it is, maybe like 10 times slower. If you wanted to save like the whole entire mag, it's pretty crazy. I think it's several minutes just to save the whole entire take. So when you're wanting to work fast on set, that becomes quite an issue. Plus, you can't play back the files off the card. It runs on CFast cards, and you can't play those back to your producers or your directors if they want to see it. So that becomes an issue when you're on set and they want to recall a shot that you just did. You can't do that on the Veo. You'd have to pop the card out and download it. So sometimes that's okay if you have VTR and they're recording all the playback, but not everybody wants to do that because they want to save budget. So those are some considerations on why you might shoot with the Flex versus the Veo. The other ones are size. If you wanted to do like an action sports handheld thing, it's quite a bit easier with the Veo because it's really small. It's like an Alexa mini size versus the Flex 4K is big, like an Alexa Classic or an LF. It's a big shoulder camera. So it all depends on what you're shooting. It's kind of the right tool for the right job, as always.
Yeah.
And I saw David Ma pop in. What's up, David Ma? So.
And what do you suggest for people that want to start working in slow motion? Just today I read your suggestion about the small camera like the Sony RX100. What do you suggest to experiment? Also,
totally.
I remember it works with skateboard, action sport recording.
Yeah, so high speed stuff, the best thing you can do if you want to get noticed always is shoot. You got to shoot as much stuff as you can. So the big hurdle to high speed is money. Phantom cameras are really expensive to buy. They're really expensive to rent, and it's hard to find because not everybody has them. So I would suggest finding any camera you can that can shoot high frame rates, whether that's, I mean, an iPhone can shoot 240, GoPros can shoot that. You can even get phones like the Samsung Galaxy phones, I think, can shoot like 960. But you can get smaller cameras that are not the best quality, but still do a pretty decent job for the price. Like the Sony RX100 is, I think, a $1,200 camera, and you can shoot 960. It definitely doesn't look as good as a Phantom, but if you're going to squish it down to this tiny screen size, you know, for half an Instagram post, it looks pretty good, especially for $1,200. They just came out with another one. I think it's called like a Sony Z1N or something. I don't know. You'll have to just start Googling the new Sony cameras, but that one does the same thing, and it's like $800. And you can find a used old Sony RX for probably $400. So I mean, anything that you can do to get your hands on something that would shoot higher frame rates, I would just borrow one, find one, buy one, rent one, and then I would just shoot as much as you can every single day and start building a reel. That way, once you get people noticing that you're going to start shooting high speed, then you can start, you know, picking up jobs, and with jobs you get budgets to rent the cameras that you want, and it sort of, you know, becomes a cycle that keeps happening. But you have to have the work to show first. You got to have a reel. People usually aren't going to hire you if they've never seen your work because they have no idea what you can do.
And what do you suggest about the post-production process, like plug-in for people that have cheap gears that don't have so much FPS?
Yeah, so there's really not a lot of post stuff for high speed, like specific plugins that are really great for slow-mo. There's a couple. Twixtor was a super huge popular one a while ago, but the problem with trying to use post to do your slow-mo is it doesn't always work. It just really doesn't. So it really depends on the complexity of the shot, and if it's like super organic, meaning like if it's like a whole bunch of liquids and tiny particles splashing around together, that stuff is really hard for plugins like Twixtor to make look good. Like the shot that was just up there on top, it's got tons of tiny little shrapnel, like shards of ceramic chunks flying everywhere. What programs like Twixtor try to do is they take like frame A and frame B and they try to make the frame up in between. They try to make it happen, interpolate between it and make it ultra slow. But it ends up doing this weird, distorty, globby funkiness. So really the best thing to do is just shoot it in camera. You can, I guess my big suggestion for that is finding things that already look slow. For example, a human doing a flip or a dancer with a dress doing a spin is going to look way slower than, you know, dropping candy on a table or splashing water up in the air, because the movement itself is so much slower. The slow-mo looks more slow, if that makes sense. So if you shot a person dancing at 120 frames a second, it's going to look really slow. If you shot, you know, a bunch of things exploding up into the air at 120 seconds, it doesn't look very slow. So it kind of depends on the velocity of the motion that you're trying to capture. And one way you can cheat stuff like that is by picking different angles of how you want to shoot stuff. For example, there's a pop-up on the screen right there. We always try to shoot our pop-ups at eye level. What I mean by that is when you toss an object up into the air, it's really fast at the beginning, and then it comes up to like the pinnacle of when it's going to start coming back down. So it's fast, and then it goes slow, 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 kind of hangs, then it drops, and then it goes fast. So if you shoot it at the pinnacle of when the velocity is slowing down, it looks that much slower. So there's little tricks that you can do to try to exaggerate your slow-mo and make 120 or 240 look more like 480 or something like that. So little tricky things you can do to try to pay attention to what you're shooting and what angle and what eye level that you're shooting it at makes a pretty big difference.
Okay. Guys, please use the question mark below for the question. Tarika, we already pinned your question. Chris already replied before. I don't know what you are referring. So let's talking about liquids, Smash Lab. I read people want to know more about Smash Lab. What are your favorite kind of work in slow-mo and why?
Oh, yeah, that's tough. So Smash Labs was a fun side project that I've been doing for a while. I haven't smashed anything new recently. I really need to. But that was sort of a side project that really just came out of us wanting to smash stuff. It's really fun to break things in slow motion or light them on fire or blow stuff up or, you know, shoot bullets through watermelons. And like up on the top, you can see like we made a potato gun, basically. I don't know if you know what that is, but it's like a big PVC pipe that you fill with like hairspray and then you light it and the pressure shoots a potato out or whatever you want. So we took a piece of wood and shaped it into kind of like a bullet and shot it out of a potato gun at a bunch of stuff. We literally went down to like Goodwill. This was quite a while ago. We went down and just bought a bunch of vases and weird stuff and just smashed them because it looks awesome. So that was kind of the whole point of Smash Labs, was just to experiment and mess around, and I'm still doing it. The ultimate goal, I think, with Smash Labs would be to do it every single week and have guests and, you know, invite people to come on and smash stuff with me in the studio or wherever, or get really creative. We've got a couple plans that I haven't told anybody about yet, but I'll release the information soon. But I guess the funnest stuff to do is just find the weirdest creative ways to smash things, like the potato gun. That was really fun to just come up with a different way rather than just throw it on the ground or hit it with a golf club or, you know, yeah. So Smash Labs is really fun. But the favorite thing to shoot besides like smashing things or blowing stuff up, man, I mean, abstract stuff is really cool, but everything is cool in its own way. Like you can see up there, there's the Peacemaker stuff. I love shooting with Peacemaker because they always get to do fun, crazy things. There's that robot water drop macro things are really exciting to shoot with robots because they're crazy. All the food stuff I get to do with David Ma is crazy. He always comes up with the gnarliest ideas for how we can like stick a probe inside a cheese grater. You know, I mean, anything, it's pretty much just all exciting. Like all of it's exciting in its own way. So anytime you do a different shoot. Maybe that's the most exciting part, is getting to approach something from a new angle to try to find a way to make it look a little bit different than you've seen it before. So it's all pretty fun.
You mentioned the macro work. People asked last time essential accessories for macro work.
Yeah, well, you definitely have to have macro lenses if you want to do real macro stuff, because normal lenses only focus so close. So a good macro lens makes a huge difference because you can really get in there. And then it's still super popular to shoot with the probe lenses. There's a lot of them out there. There's the Inavision, there's the Laowa, which everybody knows about now. There's even the Micro Mac, which is a different one. I think there's 3 or 4 other ones. They even have probe lens systems that you can put real lenses on. But the whole, for food at least, and tabletop stuff, most of the time when people do probe lenses, they want the real small, long ones, so you can go through, and you've seen them, they're everywhere on the internet now. It's like a cavern of food or something. You're pulling back with like these all sorts of stuff all over the sides, and it really just exaggerates the size of everything, and it just makes it look like you're in this insanely huge world of macro. So those are definitely important, but then you have to have the lighting for it. The lighting is major. Lighting is huge for high speed because you need so much more light than you need for real time. Because, I mean, to shoot 1,000 frames a second, you need about 5.5 stops more light. So that's not 5 times, that's 5.5 stops. So that's like 25 times or something. It's pretty ridiculous. It's a huge amount of light just to be able to shoot that. And then when you're trying to shoot with like a probe lens like the Laowa, that's like an f/14 or an f/16 wide open. So you need big lights. You need 10Ks and 20Ks just to be able to see something.
Yeah,
So
no
it
cheap
gets
light, and also light that don't flicker, because you can have a lot of problem. We talked about this. What do you think about
Surface.
robot? Are them always necessary? Because I watch works from you with or without robots. You created also some rig solution really smart to skip the robot, because I think require also a nice budget.
Yeah, like, so robots are super epic. They're really fun to play with. That's where you can really get complicated, and you can build rigs to work with the robots, and you can trigger them on specific frame rates in different ways. You can trigger them audibly, with sounds. You can trigger them visually. You can trigger them with lasers. You can trigger them by a switch. It's pretty insane what you can do with robots and rigging. You can kind of do whatever you want. You can just make it up and do crazy things. And it extends further than slow motion too. You see it a lot even in like photography stuff. You'll see it a lot in food, in magazines and ads and stuff. When you see like a drink explosion, there'll be a rig for, gosh, all sorts of stuff. There'll be sometimes like 4 rigs, like one to like drop ice, one to shoot the liquid out, one to like drop a straw in, all at the same time and trigger the camera or the slow-mo camera. So rigs are pretty insane. You can kind of do whatever you can imagine, really. We also, though, especially on Instagram, I like to try and do stuff that you don't always need fancy rigs and robots for. I mean, I love showing the robots and I love showing the rigs and the weird stuff. But if you don't have robots, it's nice to show, I don't know, cheap or easy DIY ways of doing stuff. For example, you can make a pneumatic rig that can pop stuff up in the air. But if you don't have that, or you don't have the money for it, you can just put stuff on any kind of fabric. You could get a silk, you could get a flag, you could get a bed sheet, you could even get a piece of foam core, or even a table if you really wanted to, and you can put a pile of stuff on it, and if you hit it hard enough from underneath, it'll still pop the stuff up in the air. So you don't have to have big fancy robots to do it. In the same way with slow-mo, some of the stuff you can't really do without really high speed, but other things you can, like pop-ups, for example. If it's going super, super fast and you're shooting it straight on, it's just going to be hard to get it really slow unless you bring it up the camera to the peak velocity where it starts to slow down. Or if you tilt the camera and point it down and the pop-up comes up into the camera, you could do that with an iPhone really easily and it'll pull its own focus. It's pretty insane. iPhones do a lot more, I think, than people realize. Once you shoot with a manual camera and it's not pulling its own focus and it's not changing its own exposure and everything, it's different. It's harder. So we like to mess around.
We received a lot of questions about how to keep subject in frame focus in slow motion.
Yeah. In slow motion, it's super hard. That's why we use robots, because if you're doing 1,000 frames a second, super slow-mo shot, and you want to pull focus, you need something like a robot to do it. It's really hard for a focus puller to nail that focus in a quarter second every time, especially when you have multiple focus points.
Yeah.
Robot motion control is really the only accurate way to do it repeatably.
It requires a lot of tests, I think. How many tests? And also tell us more about some epic fail.
Oh yeah, geez. Well, pretty much any shoot that you go on, things go wrong. I mean, that's kind of why you need to learn to be resourceful, is because, you know, anytime you go on a shoot, everything's working great until you actually get on the shoot, and then sometimes equipment just doesn't work. You know, same way with robots, same way with everything else. You know, Phantom cameras are no different. I always have at least, you know, 3 ways to control the camera with me, just in case something goes wrong. They have things called the pickle switch, which is kind of like a intervalometer for a camera. It's just a little remote that comes out and you click the button and that triggers it. But you can control the camera from the on-camera controls. And then I have an app you'll see a ton all the time that looks like a little phone, and I control the camera that way, because sometimes like a router will go out, or VTR, or somebody will be on set and their Wi-Fi interferes with what I'm trying to do with my Wi-Fi, etc. You always have to have alternate ways of making things work when everything hits the fan. Definitely things go wrong, for sure. Yeah, but I mean, you just got to be ready to roll with it. You know, things always go crazy, and you have to be able to work on your feet. And that's part of being on a team. You know, having a really good team of people around you is essential, because none of this stuff really happens by itself. I think in the very beginning, when people first get into film or commercials, they want to do everything themselves. And that just doesn't really happen, especially when you start doing larger productions where you have, you know, a lot of things you need to coordinate at once. You know, you have not even just food, but like action sports and like car commercials and things where you're trying to communicate with other drivers. You're trying to like close down roads and all these things. You can't do that stuff all by yourself. So it's definitely always a team effort.
You have to know also more about their work to think like them in this specific work, like a driver, like,
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, someone asked cheapest robot, favorite robot.
Yeah, there's not really a lot of cheap robots. You can find robots online on like eBay and stuff, surprisingly enough, and you can get them pretty cheap. I think I saw one the other day for like $10,000 maybe. But then you have to program it. There's the hard part, is you can find robots from like KUKA and other places, but then you have to write your own code. You have to learn how to control it. So it's pretty tricky to get a cheap robot that's not already set up to be used for filmmaking. You can definitely dig into the internet and find ways to sort of create them yourself, but there really isn't a cheap option. There's a couple major companies. Motorized Precision is one of the ones you see me work with all the time. They have 3 different robots right now, but they're not cheap. Same with Bolt, Mark Roberts Motion Control. They have a couple robots. Camera Control out of Southern California, they've got their own robots too, and they also work with Bolt. But none of them are cheap. You know, we're all talking like over $100,000 usually. So yeah, if you wanted to do some super simple motion control, you know, you could get something like what is it, like the DJI handheld gimbal. And those can even do like motion control settings. You know, it's not the same thing exactly, but you can do like time lapses and things with them, and you can pair your phone sometimes and, you know, do little moves. But it's definitely not the same as a robot, mostly because you can't put a big camera on it, and the reach isn't far enough and the speed isn't fast enough. So unfortunately, there's not really super cheap robots. I will say So Motorized Precision has a robot called Vigo, which is a model mover, and it's made by Universal Robots. Same kind of robot. They're like smaller robots that are, you can technically put a camera on them, like especially if it's a lightweight camera, and you can do stuff, but I think it's still like $45,000 or so. Pretty expensive. So unfortunately, there's not a super cheap robot unless you like build it yourself and learn how to code it yourself.
You mentioned before the teamwork. I
Yeah,
would love to hear more about the teamwork, the right mindset, and the right people to
yeah,
working with on set. I
totally.
just pinned one, and dream big, work hard, and don't worry about the haters. How to
Yeah,
develop the right mindset to go forward to put a milestone and achieve that.
for sure, for sure. So there's so many ways nowadays. That's rhymed. That's funny. There's so many different avenues now to be a filmmaker, if you will. You know, if you want to use that term, however you want. I mean, there's social media. You know, there's which is all part of social media. But you could be a YouTube filmmaker. You know, you can make plenty of money doing that. You could be someone who does live events. You could do commercial filmmaking, which is mostly what I do these days. You could do narrative filmmaking, which is mostly films. There's so many different things you can do, and they're all completely different. They have overlapping parts, but when we're talking about being on set, usually as like a commercial set, which is most of the stuff you've seen like on the BTS up here and everything, it's such a relational industry. You really have to be friends. Like you have to get along with people. So one of the hardest things I think for some people when they're first getting into it is they don't know how to be a team player. So when you're working by yourself, you know, maybe making something for Instagram or YouTube, it's only you usually, and you're just doing it all yourself and um, all that stuff. Somebody was just saying they follow me on TikTok. What's up, TikTok? You know, that's another great thing you can do. TikTok is epic. But when you're working for yourself, it's totally different than working for a team because you have to make all these decisions and everything's up to you. But when you're working with a team, you're just one small part in like a group of maybe 5, 10, 15 or more people. So you really have to learn how to stay within your, you know, respective field, if you will. So when you're on a bigger set, like a commercial set, you usually have most of, if it's a decent budget, you know, most of the roles. You've got your PAs, your grips, your gaffers, your electrics, your DPs, your ACs, you know, your directors, your producers, and then you have agency there as well, you know, and they might have a VTR set up. So you'll have all the production people over here, and you'll have the food stylists and the riggers over here, and then you'll have, you know, the grips and the people over here, and then you'll have agency over there, and everybody kind of works in their own little group, but they all work together as a team. And you have to learn to be able to do what you're being hired for really well without someone having to tell you what to do all the time, but also to anticipate what people need from you. So if you're like an AC, you know, working with your DP, you know how that person wants their camera built usually because you've either worked with them before or you've built enough cameras to know like, oh, we're going to do a robot shoot. We're going to need to put, you know, some focus motors on this camera. Every job is totally different, but the whole point is learning how to do your job well enough to get hired, first of all, but then being able to get along with everybody and be a nice person that does a really good job, is a really hard worker on set, but still fun to be around because when you're on these big sets, you're usually there for, you know, 8, 10, 12, 16, 18 hours, like really long days. And if you have a really bad attitude or, you know, you're just not good at your job or you're causing a lot of problems or you're just kind of a jerk, no one's ever going to want to work with you again.
Yeah.
So, you know, by being good at your job and by being, you know, a fun person to work with, you know, at least a positive, optimistic person who is going out of their way to do a good job, that just goes a really long way because the reason it's so relational, like I said, is you're only as good as your last job. So you go work with this new agency, you know, maybe they hired you because they couldn't get the last person they worked with and you show up, whether you're PA, grip, DP, whatever, you do a really good job and everybody gets along. They're like, wow, we should work with this person again. This person was really cool to work with. Like versus if you don't do a good job, they might be like, don't ever hire this person. And then the next time somebody asks them, hey, who should we hire? Well, don't hire this person. They were terrible to work with. So it's it's relational that way. It kind of
Yeah.
gradually builds. You do a good job, you meet some fun people, you make friendships, you know, you hire each other for each other's
Yeah.
jobs. And then that leads to knowing this person, then knowing this person, then these 5 people know these 5 people. And over the years, it just continually grows and you get more and more work and you know, excel, I
Yeah.
guess is the way to say it. And the second part of the question is, you know, besides working hard, don't worry about the haters. 100%. Like it's so much more prevalent now than it was before social media. Like social media, the internet is full of haters. Like people just like to talk smack, like trolls all day long. That's all they do is they get on there and they bite down on people and they just throw hate out because it's easy. It's really easy to get online, you know, and type up your little comment and say how much you hate people. They don't say that in
From the
person because
seat.
they'll probably get hit in
From
the
the seat.
face. Yeah,
You're
but
wrong.
that's what people do on the internet because they usually have a fake account and they don't know who, you'll never know who they are. They're just a random screen name.
Yeah.
So why would you care about what those people say anyway? They don't know who you are. They have no idea how hard you work. They have no idea who you are as a person. So you just got to learn to get a thick skin and not take it personally. Like it doesn't matter. Who cares? Who cares what anybody thinks? You know your own value. You know how hard you're working. All you got to do is just show up and do it. You know, forget the haters. Haters will be hating. That's just how it always is. You know, it never stops. So it's kind of actually a good thing though. If you get a bunch of people hating on you, they're just promoting you. You know, let the haters comment, let the haters share your work because they're just giving you free promotion. You know, so just
Absolutely.
ignore them, you know, or say something back nice to them because obviously they're so upset, you know, with their own situation that they have to try to bite down on you, and that's unfortunate. But you know, you just stay positive and ignore the haters and keep doing your thing, and it'll end up going in a good direction.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%. And have you ever thought to switch in the feature film work? Someone is asking dream to eventually
um,
get into narrative
you know,
filmmaking.
I love features. I think features are great. I don't do any work in the feature world with Highspeed at all. I've done like a couple small things here or there. I did some aerial stuff for like a feature. I did some like Highspeed stuff for like a music video before, but I haven't really done pretty much anything Phantom related for like feature films. It's definitely something I would do. I'm super open to it. It's just a totally different world than I'm in. You know, a lot of times the commercial and the feature worlds don't overlap. So it's not that I wouldn't. I would absolutely love to. It's just not the like industry that I'm currently in. You know, most of the people I work with, they're all trying to get me for commercials. So I just keep doing commercials. But if anybody wanted to do features, yeah, let's do it. Like I'll shoot whatever. I'll shoot pretty much anything. You know, even if people just want to, you know, go blow up some watermelons with, you know, guns or arrows or, you know, potato cannons. I don't care. I think all of it's fun and I would do any of it. But yeah, I guess we'll see. I guess we'll see what happens over the next couple of years. Who knows? You never know. I mean, if I do, you'll see it. You'll see it on the internet. You'll definitely see it on Instagram. So
I received some question about lighting setup. We already talked a bit, but
yeah,
setup for beginners that want to start and cheap and good quality of light for high
yeah.
speed work.
Excuse me.
Also,
That
some basic accessories for that.
sure. The really hard thing about slow mo is you have to have flicker free lights. So, and when I say slow mo, I'm talking about like 480 frames a second, 600, 800, 1000. When you're down at like 24 or 60 or 120, it still matters, but it doesn't matter as much. What I mean by that is there's a lot of lights out there that they'll work great. You won't run into any issues. But once you start getting on the much higher end of frame rates, a lot of lights flicker. Like tungsten lights, tungsten lights are great because you can get them really cheap. You know, you can get a used kit of like RE lights, or like mole lights or Desisti lights, like a lot of lights, really cheap. But the problem is if you're trying to shoot 1,000 frames a second, they're gonna flicker unless it's over a 2K tungsten, because the bulb usually in those 2K tungstens is really large. And what it is in those how those bulbs work is the filament is having electricity, you know, push through it, and it lights it up. It heats up the filament. So with bulbs that large, they don't have time to cool down before the electricity comes through and lights them back up again. So you won't get the flicker, the pulsing. With LEDs, you don't really have that issue, but a lot of LED manufacturers are not really making their stuff flicker free for like 1,000 frames a second, because not everybody shoots 1,000 frames a second. So even though somebody says my lights are good for high speed, they might not be good for 1,000 frames a second high speed. So you really got to test it. It's tough. It's really tough to pull out some lighting companies that are cheap for beginners, you know, because I think a lot of people want to buy stuff for under $1,000 and all that. I would honestly say go outside. You know, if I was going to do high speed stuff, going outside when you're just starting, you have no money to buy stuff, it's free. It's the sun. It's sunlight. You know, as long as it's a sunny day, that's a great way to shoot high speed, because it's going to be bright enough to shoot 1,000 frames a second as long as it's a sunny day, you know, and you can shape it. You can get some, you know, you can get some bounce boards, you can get some flags, you can, you know, black some half of it, you know, and get a nice contrast. And it's way cheaper than trying to go get like a $4,000 light and light something inside, you know. So that, I definitely think that would be my suggestion for beginners, is just go outside, you know, because all the grip type of stuff, you can just go, you can use shiny boards, you could use mirrors, you can use, you know, if you go to like Home Depot or like a hardware store, you can buy those really large 4x8 sheets of, I guess it's insulation, or like, it's kind of like styrofoam, but you can make your own, you know, bounce boards that way. You can make huge 4x. You can do, like photographers do V flats all the time. So it's the same thing. It's basically taking two big 4x8 sheets of foam core and taping them together on one side, and it makes like a V, and it can stand by itself without a stand. So there's a lot of things you can do to work with it that way. And I mean, it's so much cheaper than having to go spend a couple $1,000 on lights. But if I was going to buy lights and I had money, I would buy light panel Geminis, because they're really great. They have no flicker issues at all at any frame rate. And they're RGB, they're controllable, but they have enough output to shoot 1,000 frames a second. But everybody uses them also for everything else. Like you can use them cinematically for all your 24 stuff. You can get really creative with them. They have all the effects in them and everything. So, but they're pretty expensive. You know, I think they're like $4,000-ish, $3,500. So they're not cheap, you know. So for beginners, I would say definitely go outside. Going outside is your best friend. I did a bunch of videos before with like, what was it, like Airbag Company? We had to blow up a bunch of airbags to test some gear. All I did was take a mirror board out on a combo stand and just bounce the sun directly into the whatever you call that, the airbag. And that's it. That's all we used. It was great. It worked great. So
if you guys go to the Chrisvtv profile and scroll carefully all the feed, you can find a lot of stuff also outside. And I remember you shared also a lot of diagram where people can learn more about how to light a specific set. There's also Martin that is suggesting, Martin Smith, one of the best gaffer in the world, is suggesting 5K minimum, but mirror outside, already said by Chris. So go outside, start trying, start learning from some diagrams. From Chris, you can scroll and find a lot of information. So start from the bottom, learn a lot and test a lot.
And anybody who's looking at any of my feed posts, you can always just DM me if you're curious on like getting a lighting diagram. You know, a lot of times I try to show where the lights are positioned in the BTS, so you can kind of get an idea. But if you want, you know, if you have more questions, just shoot me a DM. Like I'm happy to answer whatever as much as I can.
Yeah. I'm scrolling. The question arrived in the comment and also in the question mark. So in the meantime, I would love to know your next goal, your next project, and your next personal goal.
Yeah, that's so tough. I get asked that a lot. I mean, I'm definitely doing more and more commercial stuff. I just did Actually, I did like already. It was kind of crazy. Things are sort of starting to pick up a little, which has been weird coming out of quarantine, even though we're still in it. But I just did a couple commercials for the first few days of June. I can't talk about what they are. That's why I didn't really show too much BTS on my story because we're all NDA'd. But they're pretty cool. It's all robot stuff. It'll be heavily robot with CGI, and it'll probably come out in like a month or so. That was really fun. And then there's a new, I'll say it's an update to a product that a lot of people really like. That's coming out in probably 3 weeks for how can I say? It's a cool camera accessory that I think a lot of people have used or will like, and that's all I can say, unfortunately. But I don't know, in the future, it'll be definitely more. I plan on buying my own robot one of these days. And once I actually have a robot at my disposal to use like on a daily or weekly basis, I'll probably be putting out way more content. They're just so much fun. There's so many things you can do with a robot that you can't do by hand. It opens up a whole lot of worlds to motion control, and it's just crazy. So that's probably the next step, is doing, more robotic stuff. I really love robotic stuff, but it would be maybe acquiring a robot of my own. And then, yeah, I think I'm gonna mess around with making some fun swag. I think, I've done a lot of stickers before and given away a lot of stickers to friends and stuff. I think making some t-shirts and pins and things like that would be really fun to mess around with that kind of stuff. But definitely career-wise, it's just more of the same, more robots, more high-speed stuff, maybe some music video stuff. I think that would be really fun. I've got a lot of friends who work on music videos, and I think that would be a really fun avenue to sort of dive into with the high-speed stuff, because that music videos are so creative. Like, you can kind of do whatever you want, for a lot of music videos. So I think that's one thing that really interests me on the music video front, is that would be really fun, to do some stuff like that. And then we'll see. Who knows? Maybe it'll be jumping more into the narrative world of filmmaking. I don't know yet. I'm not sure, but definitely just way more slow-mo. Just ramp it up. Keep ramping it up every day.
Great.
Oh, I see a question here.
Yeah,
is it
just some
mandatory to
question
use?
about software and post-production.
Yeah. Is it mandatory to use After Effects, or can we just do it in Premiere? I'm not exactly sure what that question means. I'm assuming, can you just edit slow-mo in Premiere? You can edit in either one. I use both. I use Premiere, I use After Effects, I use DaVinci Resolve a lot. My workflow, if you're interested in how to ingest Flex 4K files. So Flex 4K, Phantom Flex 4K file is its own proprietary file. It is a .cine file, so it's like its own RAW. It's called CINE. And so you can bring it into you can bring it into Premiere or DaVinci. You can't bring it into After Effects. But if you bring it into Premiere, it's kind of like a flat log, weird kind of look. If you bring it into DaVinci, it looks exactly like you shot it in camera. It retains the metadata. So when I shoot Flex stuff, I like to bring it into DaVinci, and then I like to make my transcodes there, and then I bring them into either Premiere or After Effects. But you can use either one of those programs. You don't have to use After Effects to work with, Phantom files. You just can't use the raw Phantom files in After Effects. You have to convert them to ProRes or something else. So,
okay.
If that answers.
What is like working with David Ma?
David freaking Ma. I love David Ma.
This is like the second chapter of
Chapter 2. David Ma is probably one of the coolest guys you'll ever meet. I don't know how many commercials we've done together now. Let's see. I don't know. It's probably at least 6 or something. We've done quite a few. I've included a bunch of the stuff on I guess I should do this way, up there in the BTS. You'll see like the Lay's stuff is definitely the most recent project that we did together, which was, I think it was 6 different, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, maybe like 6 different chip flavors. And each of them had their own like specialty rigs. You know, the cheese grater one was obviously a probe lens inside of a cheese grater, like pulling out. That was a really cool shot. There was like the barbecue grill for the barbecue potato chips with like the baster spinning around. So that was sort of like a drill rig. Let's see, there was the like the jalapeno spin for the cheddar jalapenos, which basically was, you know, see there's some of them right there you can see up there. All of them though were really cool. The really fun thing about working with David, besides the fact that he's just a really cool dude, is he always wants to do something really crazy. Like he wants to do something creative, which is super refreshing if you're working with a director, because sometimes people are sort of afraid to push the boundaries. But David's not. Like David is super, I don't know how to say it, creative, I guess. You know, he's just really creative with what he wants to do. So it's like, how can we talk a bunch on the phone. Like he'll come up with his creative decisions, you know, and concepts. He's got his own process, but then he'll include people like me and John Shafto and riggers and everybody and say, hey, so this is kind of what I want to do. Now, how do we make it work? How do we make it cool? What do we need to pull it off? So it's just really cool. It's like a really collaborative, you know, friend process. Like he's obviously like the, you know, the creative mastermind of it all, but he lets everybody contribute, which I think makes things better. You know, he lets us give our input and like try to find ways we can, you know, come together as a team and make it all the most efficient and epic as possible. So that's what I would say is really cool about working with David. And he's just really funny. He's hilarious. Like we both watch The Office. So there's way too many jokes on set about, you know, The Office, and we're always quoting the show and just being crazy. So everybody that works on a David Moss set is really fun. I don't think I've ever worked on one that wasn't fun. Yeah. Everybody's really cool. So, and I saw that stuff. Ben Eats was in there. Yo, I see that. What's up, Ben? He's dope too. Everybody's just cool. Like that's the great thing about working with the good teams. When you find good people to work with, you always try to work with them again, because then everybody's having a great time and you're making good work, and it just works out. You know, that goes back to the whole, it's really important to try to be a hard worker and try to get along, because it kind of becomes like a film family. Like everybody sort of just ends up really liking each other and getting along, and it's rad. So,
So
excuse me.
Owen, I read your question, but we talked about gears a lot. All those live are in the YouTube channel. You can find link in bio after the live, and this episode in a couple of days will be online there. About this live we are doing simply with an iPhone. An iPhone allows us
Yeah.
to show stuff, guys. That's all. We are a couple
What's
of
up?
minutes
What's up,
yet.
man?
What will the effect of coronavirus be on filmmakers?
Yeah.
Just
So, I mean, already things have been crazy, you know, with all the coronavirus stuff, you know, like tons of jobs were canceled, you know, when everything first happened. At least for me, I know a lot of my friends, pretty much everybody that I know had at least several like travel jobs that got completely canceled or held, and then just disappeared, you know. So I think that it's probably going to be more of the same, you know, like productions are still going to be, you know, held off for a while. We started shooting in Portland, you know, at the beginning of June more. We've done like 4 shoots so far, but it's been way different. So there's, you know, now there's all the COVID guidelines on how you have to operate on set. So it's really different. At least for us up here, it might be different for other people. But like, it's really kind of weird, honestly. Like everybody has to wear masks. Everybody has to wear gloves the whole time, whether you have film gloves or if, you know, you have the little like medical plastic gloves and you have to sanitize your gloves like every couple hours or something, or if you go anywhere. Much smaller crews, like they're trying to limit the amount of people on set. They're doing like temperature checks like multiple times throughout the day. Like there's a whole lot of different ways that things have to go down to be able to work on set, which makes it kind of tricky, honestly. Like it makes it a little bit harder to work that way. It slows things down, you know, which is, I don't know, good or bad. But I think that productions will continue to sort of ramp up. But I also think that there's going to be a lot of other work, you know, that's going to start picking up more, like direct to client work, like social media work, you know, which I think is why it's really important to always have a side hustle, you know, like don't wait for only film jobs to come around with crews. Like take your own photos, you know, like I know so many people from the internet that are doing crazy cool things. Like my buddy was just on here a minute ago, Nick Wilson Photos, Nick Wilson Photo, dude's a savage. He's awesome. He's rad. He's always doing stuff on the side. He also does stuff for like Amazon. You know, he's a killer photographer. He does a ton of bike stuff. I'm super into bikes. So, you know, and he's got a bunch of tattoos. So we talk about cool stuff. But, you know, he's got a side hustle. Like I've got a side hustle. Like most of us have side hustles. You kind of have to, especially with these jobs slowing down, you know, and who knows when it's going to fully ramp up. You got to always be doing other things as much as possible, whether that's Instagram, TikTok, Amazon, whatever, starting a YouTube, starting a blog, starting a podcast. Like just do as much as you can. Do like 20 side hustles, you know, like just do it because you don't know. I mean, there might not be any more jobs for the whole rest of June, you know, because of all this stuff. I don't know. So don't let that stop you, you know.
Absolutely.
Just start getting work as much as you can. Call up every business owner you can in the whole entire town and say, hey, what can I do to help? Like, I'm a filmmaker. You know, you need a commercial, you need help with your social media. Like, don't wait. Do something today. So, but yeah, Corona stuff definitely is tough. It's going to keep affecting things for a while, I think, you know.
Yeah.
So it is what
Absolutely.
it is.
I think we are so close to the limit of Instagram of 60 minutes. So I think to say thanks to everyone for watching, and thank you so much for all those valuable insights, suggestions, inspiring. I suggest again people to go and follow Chris for those don't follow yet, and check carefully all the stuff he shared. Check the schemes, the diagrams, everything he shared is so inspiring. He's so open to share everything he knows. He's really a big inspiration for everyone. We are so proud and happy to have you today, man, and hope to meet
Glad to
in
be here.
person really, really soon.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for letting me hang out.
Yeah.
Anybody hit me up anytime. DM me, ask me questions. I'm down.
Yeah. In a couple of days, this episode is online on the YouTube channel, so
Sweet.
guys, stay tuned. And maybe Thursday or next Sunday, the next one live. So thanks so much again. Thanks so much, and see you soon to everyone. Ciao, man.
Later.